I don't know. Um, I'm sure we did, but there's, we covered a lot of little things. Um, yeah, I don't know. I don't have anything in particular that I would say. Yeah. My name's Luke Wessman. I'm a tattooer. I've traveled all over the world tattooing with some of the best tattooers in the world. I've been doing it 20 years. Um, Quick answer is yes, it does really hurt. I think if you asked me when I was a young guy at 20 years old, I would say no, because I was so excited to receive them. And there's a lot of adrenaline when you get them. Now that I've got most of my body covered, it's like the excitement has gone a little bit, and it's more of like I don't know, I've let my guard down and it hurts a lot more now. I don't know if I've gotten soft in my older age. I always think the most sensitive spot is the spot you're getting at the moment. but I do say, like, behind the knee or the rib or the torso, places like that, there's a little more nerve endings. So it seems to be like a little more trying on your nerves. It's funny. It's really hard to describe. I've heard it described as a hot knife dragging across your body. I've heard it like getting poked by a needle many times over and over again. It's a unique feeling, though. It's a unique feeling, and it's a really unique experience. So it's hard, and I think it's a little different for each client, how their pain tolerance is, how they feel that day. There's a few variables that go into it. Each artist maybe has a different approach, and they tattoo a little harder or a little more abrupt. I think you have to get one to really know. That's a tough one, because people, even in 20 years of tattooing, people, they do something really bold by getting a tattoo, but a lot of times, 9 out of 10, they get something very safe. So imagery that is like more common nowadays, or something they've seen a lot of, and they don't go too nuts. So over the years, there hasn't been too many like really crazy designs. Maybe epic in the idea of like proportion, like full beautiful body, back suits and back pieces and stuff like that. I've done some really wonderful back pieces that are very impressive when you see them. But I think I've even talked people out of really crazy tattoos, like something crazy on their forehead or face or cheek. I think it's up to me to kind of hold a little bit of a line and not go too far. And even if the person wants to, it's, in my opinion, I have to have a little bit of like a guardian position, so I don't let them go nuts. So nothing too crazy. Like maybe some stories I can't talk about, but a lot of times I keep people in really good, timeless tattoos. See, I don't think most of them are regrettable, even the bad ones. I think that a lot of them lock in a time in your life, and they tell a story, whether it be not just the story of the tattoo, but the story of where you were at that time in your life. So a lot of times that's overlooked by a stupid design. Maybe you went with your friends in college and you all got like something stupid on your butt, or, the tattoo itself might not be the best, and it could be seen as regrettable, but the event and the time and that moment in your life is very special, and it's locked into that tattoo. So I think as a tattooer, I think of it as more of a story than just a piece of art. I have so many tattoos. And like I was just saying earlier, the amount of them, each one has some kind of different meaning, whether it be a different time or place. I probably have a tattoo from 14 countries, I have tattoos from all these places, and maybe the tattoo is simple, but that time or that trip or that adventure was so special that it's locked in that little tattoo. So, but I have so many, man. I don't even know how many I have. a lot of times I say I have one big one, you know, because they're all connected and it goes from my feet to my head. Oh man, that's an easy one. It's the death of a loved one. It could be an animal or a relative. It's the saddest thing, you know, the loss of someone you love. And tattooing is a great way to carry that person's the idea of the person with you. So I always say it's the best tattoo and the worst, you know, in remembrance of somebody you loved. It's the worst tattoo, but also the most meaningful. I would always say, as a struggling artist, you're always in search of the better, you know, the better technique, the better style, the better design. So everyone that has passed, I'm always looking to get better. So I don't really know how, I can't sit and go, oh, that was the one, you know? It's always looking for the fault and like, oh, how can I do that different or better? And I think that helps you progress, but it also tortures you. So I wouldn't have one that I'm like, that's the best. The worst one that I have is probably for my friends. Well, I have two friends that died when I was young. And those are the worst ones I have because the meaning, right? Also the most powerful and the most special. But my friend Cookie and Sid were two guys that I worked with when I was first starting to tattoo. And they both died a couple of years apart. And so the tattoos for them are my worst. I think that there is some debate about that. With Christians, I don't think there's as much of a problem as there would be with like Jews or Islamic people. I think there's a lot more, and even Asian countries, there's a lot more stigma, and it's a lot more debatable. I think Christianity is a little looser. I think Christians are a little more open to it, and also generational. You know, it's more generational, I think, than religion. Aside from the hard religions that are very against it, you know, I think, yeah. The first one that I got was my older brother had a friend who was doing tattoos in his apartment, and he was tattooing some of our friends in the neighborhood. And tattooing was still very like taboo, you know, it's like, but I also grew up in an area where there was a lot of rough people, like gangsters and criminals and sailors and military guys. So the people that I saw with tattoos were like maybe tougher. And being a young kid in a poor community, I wanted to look tougher. So at 16, I went to him and I got the first tattoo on my back. And I was very nervous. I had my young girlfriend there. She was holding my hand and I was sweating. And I thought, oh, I probably never get another one. This is really painful. And then I kept going every week since. I wish I would have known better tattooers because as I don't regret the old ones, I would have made better decisions to get better quality work. I haven't figured it out yet. I think it's when I take my next trip out of the country, I'll probably find something to get on my travels that represents the trip or the place. So it hasn't been revealed to me yet, but I definitely will be getting something this year. You know, I always say I always wanted a palm tree and a koi fish because I have so many tattoos and I don't have either of those. The palm tree reminds me of paradise in California, and I don't have one tattooed on me. And then koi fish, I always love the Japanese art, and I love the way the scales look on the body. And I've done many of them in my career. And so the fact that I don't have one is kind of sad to me. And I don't really have room for them. As far as tattoo styles, I love traditional styles, like traditional Japanese and traditional Americana, which is like, I guess the most commonly known as like Sailor Jerry with the Americana, because it's like the bold, you know, pinup girls and roses and designs that are really strong. And then in the Japanese culture, they're very timeless, you know, the way they fit the body and the scale are always getting, you know, Japanese people are always getting like bigger ones, like big koi fishes and dragons and bodysuits. I love the styles that hold the test of time. You know, there's a lot of cool new styles that look really fancy and artistic and pretty, but the solid old school styles, they last forever and they always look good. So I love the timeless old school styles. You know what? I didn't know he had some. I didn't see him. I love Keanu Reeves though. I have to see what he has. Yeah, I have to look. I'm not sure. You know, usually there's so many variables. It's not a flat rate. A lot of artists charge by the hour. So for them, they may be $100 to $200 an hour. And then the design can determine how many hours. It can be something very detailed or something very simple. So an arm can take, 15 hours to 30 to 40. It just depends on so many variables: the skin, the style of tattoo, if it's black and gray or color, how detailed and stuff like that. There's so many variables, so it's hard to say exactly. There's a lot of variables. I mean, I kind of just put them on, but I know that the removal is getting better. The laser treatment, I think they're messing with the types of lasers and the strength of the laser, but I know they work. It's just, I think it takes time. It takes a long time, because if they turn the laser too hard, it can scar the skin a little bit more. And I think a lot of places are going very light and they do a lot of sessions. And sometimes I wonder if it's for the money or it's because they're just trying to be really delicate with the skin. But then again, there's a lot of variables too, like if it's color versus black and gray versus an old tattoo. All those things come into play when they're lasering and trying to remove it. Weirdest, I have refused. When I was younger, working in Miami, a guy came into the shop and he wanted a penis tattooed on a cross. And at the time, I just thought, I don't know if I want to do this. It feels too weird, I think now I'd probably do it, no problem, artistically, But at the time I was young and I was like, this feels too weird. So I turned that one down. That one always sticks out in my mind. A teardrop, as far as I know, and I have grown up around some gang culture, as far as I know, it's never meant that you've killed somebody. Which is like the big common misconception that I've heard anyone talk about. And then maybe some circles, because a lot of times tattoos can mean different things in different prisons or different gangs. But what I know most about the teardrop in prison is if you've lost a loved one and you're too tough to show your own tears, too tough to cry. And I think there's some other meanings, but I've never heard that it means like that guy killed somebody, which is the most common misconception that I know. No, I think the styles, the trends change a little bit. So what becomes popular this year, won't be popular next year or last year. The styles change a little bit, but like I was saying earlier, the old school ones, they last through all the changes of the trends. A lot now is like very fine lines, small. You see a lot of the Hollywood models getting the tiny little ones that are really pretty and dainty, and it became very popular. But the tattoos will fade, and that one will just be a trend. So things like traditional and Japanese and things like that just will stay, forever. I mean, there's different levels of etiquettes. I think the biggest and the best one is to be respectful, and to be open. And I always say, once you do your research and you're going to a good spot, respectful and trusting, and let them kind of do their job as a professional. But you have to do your work before you go in and make sure you're going into a good spot. And that could be word of mouth, Instagram, learning the style, make sure they're good at what they do. And then a tip is really nice, but it's never required. But it is a service. And if they're in a shop, they give their money, some of their money to the owner. So the tip is just for them. And that's really nice. But as the artist, they're going to do the best job they can no matter what, regardless of the tip. But tip is nice. I mean, it's so personal, for the person to pick what they want. It's hard for me to say what you should get. I think as long as you get it done correctly and technically clean, and I think if the artist makes sure you don't get anything too stupid or poorly done, it's going to look good forever, But it could be a frog, it could be an initial for a family, or any of those. As long as it's done well, you're not going to regret it. And an artist that's good will make sure you don't do anything too stupid. As far as I know, there hasn't been any health-related issues with tattooing in like 20, 30 years, aside from maybe somebody doing something really dangerous in their home. Tattooing has become very sanitary, very safe. Everything is single use almost everywhere. So the needle is thrown away after, the ink caps. So like I always say, I think you're safer in a tattoo parlor than in a hospital, or at least similar, because everything in a tattoo parlor, even the poorest parlors and the ones that aren't really busy, they're using single use, because of access to needles and inks are a lot easier. So you're not reusing and using bad stuff. It's easier to get good stuff and it's cheaper. So you're very safe getting tattooed. I think the real threat is getting a bad tattoo because art is so subjective, so someone could say that looks nice when it's really bad. But as far as cleanliness, most shops are like really up to par. A lot of people use single use. So that means it's used for you and then it's thrown away. And then everything is for the next client, brand new. So you're pretty safe getting tattooed as far as I know. I think they still are, I think our society is opening up and becoming a lot more accepting of them. But to some degree, you still have a lot of people with the mentality of if a person has a tattoo, they're maybe a criminal or a problem, although current tattooing is the opposite. There's a lot of people, you have to have money to get tattooed. And if you're, go to some famous tattooers, you pay a lot of money. And so it becomes a status symbol, not as much like that you're a criminal. But for jobs, I still think there's a lot of people that are higher up that are hiring people and they don't want people to have, tattoos all over them. But I think it's getting better, or more open. It just means infinity. I mean, it's forever. So sometimes people put their like family names inside the lines so it can be like them forever or things like that. But yeah, it's just forever. I think probably, right? Like, because there's a lot of stereotypes attached to those kind of tattoos and you're going to feel them, and then after you talk to the person, you can kind of maybe reposition your idea of them, but just to see them, you're like, oh shit, what's going on here, and there's an issue. It's a hiccup. And then it's up to the person to kind of show that maybe they're not a criminal or a bad person or whatever those stigmas might be. Obviously you should always judge on how someone is, but yeah, if you're just looking, like if someone just looks at me, they're like, oh, that guy's probably been to prison and he looks like maybe he's a bike gang or, all this shit because of the tattoos. And then they speak with me and then they go, okay, maybe this guy is okay, but the stereotypes are still there. So yeah, hands, neck, face. So even in this modern society, I still have rules where I don't tattoo hands or neck or face unless the person is very heavily covered and they're very into the culture. I won't go right to the visible ones because, I want them to understand like how to live with tattoos and if they're really ready to be always on, because if you have it up to your sleeve, you can turn it off when you want, but once you go here, you're always on. So. Yeah, I would. I probably wouldn't have my hands or neck or face tattooed though. As someone that never thought I would travel the world like I have, I think, like I was saying before, it would be nice to just shut it off when you want to and not have the quick judgment from people. So if I could tell my younger self, I would probably say nothing visible, nothing here, because I could still have all this done and collect and be a big part of the culture and spend a lot of time in shops. A lot of times the hands, you get the initial opinion of someone, without knowing. So if you could just kind of, I think that would be nice, but I say that, and then if I didn't have them, I'd probably want them and get them. But knowing what I know now, I think there's a lot of different ways now. There's, fake skin and grapefruits and pig, dead pigs or some weird shit like that. But for me, it was my own legs, and it was my brother and my friends. And I had an apprenticeship, so I didn't start using a machine till like a year in. So I kind of had an understanding, and I had it really submerged. But yeah, people can practice in a few different ways that are similar, can simulate the skin, but nothing will prepare you for a moving, bleeding, opinionated canvas, as a human is. You just have to do it. So I mean, it's subjective because it's art, but yeah, because something that I might like that's really simple and minimal can be totally something that someone else hates. But that's really up to the person to decide, Yeah. There's been a few, and a few of them where like I saw a word that was misspelled or something. That's a big shit moment. There's only been a couple of those in 20 years. They say you're not a professional if you haven't made some mistakes. So, but the biggest one of them all was about my first couple weeks of tattooing. I had done my legs. I did one leg, and then the next night I did the other leg, and those were my first tattoos ever. And then the third day I tattooed my older brother, and I sat there and I was, I had a little design, and I made a copy, and I put it on his body right here. And I started tattooing it, and I realized, oh shit, like, it's somebody else's blood. If I mess this up, it's for life for them. Because when I was doing myself, I was like, oh, this is cool. It didn't matter, to the degree of someone else that was going to carry this for the rest of their life. So when I did that and I saw the blood coming down and I realized how difficult it was to make it perfect, I was like, oh shit, I don't know if I want to do this. I was like 17, 18 years old. And I was like, this is serious. I felt how powerful it was and how important and how careful I had to be. So that was the biggest moment of like, oh shit, I got through it, luckily. That's a big debate because there's been so many different schools of thought for that. And it really comes down to if it's applied well, if the artist had tattooed it really good on you and not overworked the skin too much or, beat up the skin, then it becomes just letting the tattoo heal on its own and giving it the most like clean, dry care. And this it varies from artists. They'll tell people to use different things. But I say if it's tattooed well, it will heal well. And you keep it clean and you don't need to over medicate it. And that means I tell people a really nice basic lotion, which lets the tattoo kind of just breathe and heal. Nothing that's meant for cut or wound because it can try to push out ink as it's trying to heal the body too much. So the tattoo really has its own healing process. And so a very minimal type of ointment is the best. But everybody heals a little bit differently because their body and their system has different things going on. But the best thing is it's tattooed well, it should heal well, unless you put too much of the wrong shit on it. Oh, yeah. Yeah, there's a big difference because when you're tattooing someone else, you can just focus on the artwork and their pain. When you're doing yourself, you're like trying to do the artwork, but you're also in pain. And it's very difficult because you want to kind of pull away because you're forcing yourself to feel the pain as you're trying to do the design. I've done maybe 4 or 5 on myself, and it's very difficult. And then to do them on other people, you know, you don't feel any pain. Mentally a little bit sometimes if they're not sitting well or they're hard to deal with, but it's very different. Yeah. You know, the road to becoming a tattoo artist has varied over the years. Like for me, I had the more traditional way where I had a apprenticeship, and that can vary by the way that someone does the apprenticeship. For me, it was a year and a half of being in a shop every day, starting at sweeping and mopping, paying attention, running errands at the very lowest level. And in payment, I didn't make money, maybe got tipped, but my payment was to be able to be around and learn, and hear conversations and see good work being done. And then if I was smart enough, I could piece together some of the tools to get the foundation. But there's other ways by, you know, maybe just paying an artist and saying, hey, will you teach me? I have, you know, this amount of money. And if they like you or see a potential, maybe they go, okay, no problem. And they maybe give you a few months and they show you all the stuff. But there's a lot of in between, a lot of different. Some people just buy the tools in their house and try on their friends, and some make it, some don't. But there's a few different ways, you know, and most artists have come into it differently because there's no school for it. There's no like barbering school or salon school. There's no tattoo school, you know, and tattooing is so sacred to a lot of people that had a hard time learning how to get there, that when schools do come up, a lot of the artists get very upset and, you know, try to pick it and try to stop it. It's crazy, but they're so passionate about how hard it was for them to learn. They don't want someone to just go pay and be able to learn at a school, which I'm not sure if is good or bad, you know, but tattooing is a very sacred profession to a lot of people. So everyone learns a little bit differently, and people that are really good sometimes hold their tricks and their details of how to do it really dear to them. And then only a special person that they connect with, they'll pass it on to, you know? So it's different for everyone. Aside from just having, if you're good, your career is going to be full of busy customers that are happy with your work, that come back. And then if you take it to the next level, maybe you use some of your art and your notoriety from tattooing, and you can apply it to working with companies and brands, and doing events. That's something that's happened for me. You know, I've tattooed so long and built a little bit of a reputation. So I have companies hiring me to do work with them. And so I can say I work with them and it's great. And they can say, hey, we worked with this guy who's a really good tattooer. And so there's job opportunities to grow by working in good collaborations with big companies. But you know, it's a service profession. You know, it's maybe not always super glamorous. You know, you're there to serve the people, you know, and give them what they want. When they bring to you an idea or a piece of art, it's your job to just labor over the work that they want, you know, and make sure it's perfect. So it's not necessarily, you know, always the road to something else. That, you know, that daily grind is sometimes the best thing that can come from it, you know, is just having the stability. And then if you try, like me, I always do different things, you know, like working with companies like Harley Davidson or Hermes or Urban Decay Makeup, all these companies, because I just like to get my hands in other shit, you know, because I know I won't be able to do this, you know, forever because of my body just sitting, you know. I've already put 20 years in. I had back surgery. So you always look for new ways to like grow your personal brand and your business. And so I always look for good collaborations. I love the most is the connection with the people. You know, I love art and I love creating, but I love being able to sit with people and have unique conversations that you would never have in a lot of other professions, you know? It's really unique. You sit there, someone's vulnerable, they're in your space, you're very close. Sometimes your head is like this close to their head, depending on where you're working. And so it's wonderful for human connection, you know? And I just think that that's the most special part of my job. What do I hate? I hate the damage it can do on your body. And then the profession for a lot of people isn't necessarily the most glamorous, or you can't, there's a lot of tattooers that don't own homes and have health insurance. And so there's some issues with it as a career for a lot of people. Some of us have been lucky and we've been able to make a little more, or have done a little bit more in a different way. But I wish that it was, perhaps more structured so you can have insurance and retirement and all these things. And it's the gift and the curse that it's such a magical, special profession, because it's not structured like a really normal career, but the fact that it is so unique is why, tattooers are one of the only type of people that rock stars look up to, so it's a special career, but there is some downsides, body and finances, that can be difficult. But yeah, I wouldn't trade it. I would say, that's a great question. What tattoo advice would I give to my children? I would just, aside from just teaching them to have an eye for what's really quality, and I would make them wait until they're of age, maybe 18, to get work, because I you change so much. I've changed so much from I was 20, I want different things now. So you just try to teach them and give them a proper mindset on how to look and approach it. But yeah, I would just try to teach them how to pay attention, and if they really wanted to get tattooed, to make sure they're getting quality work. And but as a tattooer, I'm sure they would probably want it because they would grow up around it, Faith, hope, and charity. It was the first tattoo I ever did on myself. It was a heart, an anchor, and a cross.